16 years ago, a young woman entered the mountains by herself and vanished without a trace. 2 years later, hikers stumbled upon her remains hidden inside a rocky hollow, her body dried by time, sealed in layers of wax, as though someone had tried to hold her in the world forever. The one responsible was not a recluse or a monster in the shadows, but a person who blended into daily life, someone who worked among the dead as if death itself were routine. The White Mountains of New Hampshire rise along the northern spine of the Appalachians, towering over valleys drowned in thick forest. They inspire awe and demand reverence. During summer, the trails fill with visitors chasing fresh air and sweeping views. In winter, the same landscape hardens into a frozen wasteland, where temperatures plunge to -30 and winds strike with enough force to knock a person off balance. Even seasoned climbers lose their lives here, swallowed by blizzards, missteps, or sheer misjudgment. Locals whisper that the mountains choose who they keep, punishing those who underestimate their will. In August 2009, 27-year-old Leah Thompson prepared for yet another journey into that realm. She lived in Concord, New Hampshire's modest capital, a quiet town of 40,000 where serious crime was rare and headlines usually celebrated school events or seasonal festivals. Her life followed a calm rhythm. Leah worked as a biologist in a university laboratory, studying how climate change affected regional bird populations. The work consumed her. Coworkers described her as reserved and unwavering, someone who could disappear for hours behind a microscope or a wall of data. But the mountains were her other calling. Leah had learned to hike as a child with her parents. As an adult, she often went alone. She believed the high silence cleared her mind, that among peaks and wind she felt most awake. Friends worried about her solo trips, especially in terrain as unforgiving as the Whites. Leah listened, and prepared. She always left precise route plans, carried GPS equipment, and kept a satellite phone for emergencies. Recklessness was never her way. She was small, just over 5 feet tall, slender, with dark hair usually tied back and gray eyes framed by thin glasses. Her voice was gentle, her presence easy to overlook. Leah lived alone in a modest apartment on the edge of Concord and was dating Brian, an engineer from a nearby town. Their relationship was steady, uneventful. Her parents, Robert and Martha Thompson, lived about an hour away in Lebanon, where Leah joined them every other Sunday for dinner. It was a quiet life, unremarkable in the best sense. On Saturday, August 15, 2009, Leah loaded her old blue Honda Civic and drove north. Conditions were ideal, clear skies, mild warmth, a soft breeze. She planned a 3-day trek along the Mount Adams Ridge, a route known for both its beauty and difficulty. The summit rose 1.5 kilometers high, the trail stretched roughly 20 kilometers one way, and the elevation gain exceeded 1,000 meters. Challenging, but familiar territory for her. Before starting, Leah filed her itinerary at the ranger station. She intended to begin around 10 a.m., reach Mount Adams by evening, spend the night near the summit, descend the eastern slope to Great Gulf Lake the following day, camp again, and return by noon on August 18. She included her satellite phone number and requested her parents be contacted if she failed to check back. Security cameras later captured her arrival at the trailhead at 9:45 a.m. The footage showed her stepping out of the car, tightening her laces, adjusting her pack, locking the doors, and walking calmly toward the trail. That moment marked the last confirmed sighting of Leah Thompson alive. When August 18 arrived and her car still sat untouched in the lot, concern grew. Rangers reviewed her plan and attempted to reach her by satellite phone. There was no response. Her parents confirmed they hadn't heard from her since the 15th, unusual, but not immediately alarming. That changed quickly. Martha called Brian, who said Leah had sounded happy and energized the morning she left. Silence followed after that. The search began that night. Roughly 50 people, rangers, local rescue volunteers, and Concord police, spread across the route Leah had outlined. Dogs were deployed. A helicopter scanned the slopes with thermal imaging. Every junction and trail spur was checked. 2 days into the operation, the first sign emerged. About 5 kilometers from the trail's start, at an elevation near 1,000 meters, searchers found where Leah had spent the night. A fire pit, carefully put out. Imprints of a tent pressed into the soil. Empty packages of freeze-dried beef and rice, the same brand she always carried. Proof that she had been there. Proof that she had been following the path she was meant to walk. Her parents confirmed the signs matched Leah's habits, yet the tent itself was missing. So were her backpack and sleeping gear. Everything essential had vanished. What remained were only faint marks, proof that someone had stayed there and then erased themselves from the mountain. The search teams pushed higher. They swept the summit of Mount Adams, scanned every established campsite, and descended into nearby ravines and gorges where a single misstep could have meant a fatal fall. Tracking dogs followed Leah's scent from the fire site, but it dissolved after half a kilometer across bare rock where no footprints could survive. Investigators turned to technology. A final cell signal was logged at 12:07 a.m. on August 18, pinging from a tower 3 kilometers northeast of the campsite, far from the main trails, deep in isolated terrain. After that moment, the phone went silent. It may have powered down, drained completely, or been destroyed. The satellite phone had already gone quiet days earlier, its last transmission recorded on August 16 from the same area as the camp. The search stretched on for 2 relentless weeks. Dozens of square kilometers were covered. Every trail was walked. Known caves and shelters were examined. Hikers who had passed through the region during those days were questioned. Several remembered a young woman with dark hair and a full pack moving steadily along the trail on August 15. No one recalled fear. No one noticed anyone following her. Nothing felt out of place. Investigators began weighing possibilities. An accident seemed plausible, a slip, a fall, a blow to the head, a body hidden by rocks or swallowed by icy streams. Wildlife was considered next. Bears and cougars inhabit the mountains. Encounters are rare, but not impossible. Another theory suggested she became disoriented, wandered off route, and succumbed to exposure or thirst. And then there was the explanation no one wanted to name aloud, that another human being was involved. Police shifted their focus to that final possibility. Brian, Leah's boyfriend, was questioned first. He described a calm relationship, free of conflict. His whereabouts on the day she disappeared were verified by coworkers. Her parents were interviewed next, devastated, cooperative, but unaware of anything unusual. Colleagues from the lab echoed the same refrain: Leah was kind, private, untroubled. No enemies. No strange encounters. Her computer and online accounts revealed nothing alarming: work emails, casual messages, hiking photos, notes about trails and weather. Still, Detective David Connor, who led the investigation, noticed a subtle detail others had overlooked. Leah was active on a New England hiking forum, where she exchanged route advice, posted trip reports, and asked questions. In the months before her disappearance, she had communicated regularly with several users, one in particular who went by the name Mountain Watcher. He offered guidance, shared personal knowledge, and suggested lesser-known locations in the White Mountains. Connor attempted to trace him. Forum administrators revealed the account was tied to a temporary email created through an anonymous service. Login records showed IP addresses scattered across New Hampshire, but none pointed to a real identity. After Leah vanished, Mountain Watcher stopped posting entirely. It was a thread, thin, fragile, and it led nowhere. A month later, the official search ended. No body. No evidence. Leah Thompson's case was reclassified as a disappearance under suspicious circumstances and transferred to cold case files. Her parents refused to surrender to silence. They hired private investigators, plastered the state with flyers, spoke to local media, and begged anyone with knowledge to come forward. They even created a fund to help search for others lost in the mountains. Time passed anyway. Weeks turned to months. The calls stopped coming. Hope slowly dimmed. Concord resumed its quiet rhythm. Conversations faded. Leah's name drifted into the background, joining countless others, another unresolved absence, another unanswered question. But the truth had never been far away. It was closer than anyone realized. On July 23, 2011, nearly 2 years later, 2 tourists from Massachusetts, Kevin and Jennifer Hart, set out on a simple day hike along a lesser-used side trail near Mount Adams. And the mountains, at last, revealed what they had been holding. It was hardly a trail at all, more a narrow passage worn by animals and the occasional hiker hoping to avoid the crowds. The day was clear and warm, sunlight resting gently on the slopes. Kevin and Jennifer moved without hurry, pausing often to admire wildflowers and the quiet movement of birds. Nearly 2 kilometers from the main path, on the side of a shallow ravine, Kevin noticed something that did not belong. Wedged between two massive rocks was a section of stonework unmistakably shaped by human hands. The stones were stacked with care, forming a low wall, sealed at the top by a broad, flat slab pressed firmly into place. It resembled a crude tomb or a hidden cache meant to stay unseen. Kevin stepped closer and called Jennifer over. They tried to shift the upper stone, but it wouldn't budge. Instead, they peered through the narrow gaps between the rocks. Inside was darkness, and a smell that stopped them cold. Not rot. Not earth. Something sharp and artificial. Waxy. Chemical. They took photographs, marked the coordinates on their GPS, and turned back toward the nearest ranger station. When they reported what they'd found, the ranger on duty, a young man named Tyler, suspected it might be an old cellar or a primitive animal trap left behind by hunters decades earlier. Still, something about it unsettled him. He decided it needed to be checked. The next morning, July 24th, Tyler returned to the site with two fellow rangers and Kevin. They brought shovels, crowbars, and powerful flashlights. Slowly, deliberately, they dismantled the structure stone by stone. When the top slab was finally removed and several layers cleared away, a pit revealed itself, about a meter deep, its interior neatly lined with smaller rocks. Inside lay a dark shape, wrapped tightly in heavy tarpaulin. The men exchanged uneasy looks. Tyler climbed down and carefully pulled back a corner of the covering, then froze. Beneath it was a human body. A woman. Entirely coated in a thick shell of dark wax, smoothed evenly from head to toe, as if sealed inside a ritual cocoon. The contours of her face, her hands, her feet were faintly visible beneath the hardened layer. Tyler climbed out without a word and called for police and forensic teams. Within an hour, the area was sealed off. Detectives, technicians, and a medical examiner arrived and began their work. The body was lifted from the pit with extreme care. The wax was solid but fragile, and no attempt was made to remove it on site. Instead, the remains were transported intact to the morgue at the district hospital in Berlin, the nearest major town. The following day, Dr. Elizabeth Green began the autopsy. What she encountered was unlike anything she had seen before. The wax encased the body in a layer between 2 and 5 centimeters thick, dark brown, matte, deliberately applied. Using specialized heated instruments, she slowly removed it. Beneath, the skin was mummified, dry, intact, astonishingly well preserved. Facial features were still clear. Patches of dark hair remained. The woman was clothed. A light blue hiking jacket. A t-shirt. Trekking pants. Thermal layers. All saturated with wax, yet unmistakable. In one pocket, Dr. Green found a driver's license. Leah Thompson. The news detonated across local media. The hiker who had vanished 2 years earlier had been found, not lost, not fallen, but hidden. Preserved. Buried in stone. Detective David Connor immediately reclaimed the case. One look told him this was no accident. This was intention. Precision. Control. Dr. Green continued her examination and uncovered the truth piece by piece. There were marks around Leah's neck, narrow impressions consistent with fabric or cord. The hyoid bone was fractured. Death had come by strangulation. Small puncture wounds were found near the bends of her arms. Almost invisible. Toxicology confirmed traces of succinylcholine, a muscle relaxant used in surgical anesthesia. In high doses it kills. Here, it had likely been used to paralyze, not to end life, but to silence resistance. Finally, the wax itself was analyzed. It was not beeswax. Not paraffin. Laboratory results revealed a specialized compound made from polyethylene glycol and resins, materials used in morgues and research facilities to preserve human tissue. Someone had known exactly what they were doing. Someone had not only taken a life, but tried to keep it from ever leaving the world. This particular type of wax is not something found on ordinary shelves. It is distributed only through specialized medical suppliers, intended for laboratories and morgues. Based on its condition and the state of the remains, Dr. Green concluded that Leah died 4 to 5 days after she vanished, around August 19 or 20, 2009. The preservation process began almost immediately, within a day of death. The wax coating, combined with the cold temperature inside the stone pit and the absence of air, created a perfect environment for natural mummification. Because of this unnatural balance, Leah's body endured for nearly 2 years. Her mouth had been tightly sealed with a strip of cloth wrapped around her head. Analysis showed it was simple cotton, the kind commonly used for medical bandages or dressings. For Detective Connor, the picture became clear. This was not an impulsive act. He was facing someone with technical knowledge, likely medical or biological training, someone accustomed to handling bodies, familiar with preservation methods, and able to obtain restricted materials. The investigation narrowed to those who could have crossed Leah's path. Brian was questioned again. His profession as a construction engineer placed him far from medicine, and once more, his alibi held firm. Connor revisited Leah's laboratory colleagues. Many were biologists, but none had access to morgue facilities or preservation compounds. All had verified work records during the relevant dates. Nothing pointed inward. That left Mountain Watcher. Connor returned to the hiking forum lead and demanded complete access to the account's history. This time, he received 3 years of login data. Most entries traced back to public networks, libraries, cafes, free Wi-Fi spots. But a pattern emerged. Several logins originated from a single location, Manchester Hospital, specifically from its internal network, which included the morgue facilities. Connor requested employee records from 2009. 200 names filled the list. He filtered relentlessly, searching for someone who worked directly with bodies, handled chemicals, and understood preservation. The list shrank quickly. Only 5 employees fit the profile: staff from pathology and the morgue, 2 pathologists, an assistant, and 2 technicians. One name stood out. Richard Flowers. 42 years old. Morgue technician. Employed since 2006. His responsibilities included preparing bodies for autopsies, preserving remains, and handling biological materials. He also volunteered with an organization that transported deceased Americans back from overseas, work that involved embalming, chemical treatment, and careful packing. Connor examined his background. Born in Manchester. Lived in New Hampshire his entire life. Vocational training in pathological anatomy techniques. Unmarried. No children. Lived alone in a modest house outside the city. Enjoyed hiking and frequently visited the mountains. No criminal history. No complaints. An invisible man living an invisible life. But the records told a different story. Financial documents revealed that in March 2009, 5 months before Leah disappeared, Flowers purchased 10 kilograms of preservation wax from a specialized supplier. The stated purpose was volunteer work, yet the organization's logs showed no record of its use. The wax had vanished. Then came July 2009. Flowers ordered ampoules of succinylcholine from an online pharmacy, a drug requiring strict medical authorization. The prescription was forged. At the time, it slipped through unchecked. That was enough. Connor secured a search warrant. On July 29, 2011, police and forensic specialists arrived at Flowers' home. He answered the door calmly. Cooperative. Almost serene. The search lasted several hours. In the basement, investigators discovered a small workshop, clean, organized, deliberate. A place where death was not feared. A place where someone had practiced keeping it still. The shelves told the story before a single word was spoken. Glass jars filled with chemicals stood beside dissection instruments and sealed containers of wax. Inside one cabinet, investigators discovered folders stuffed with newspaper clippings, articles on body preservation, mummification, and ancient beliefs about preserving beauty beyond death. In the margins were handwritten notes in Flowers' careful script. Observations. Calculations. Reflections on how to stop decay, how to keep a body unchanged, how to achieve what he called eternal beauty. Another folder revealed something far worse. Photographs. Women captured without their knowledge, on trails, in parking lots, inside cafes. Different faces. Different places. And among them, again and again, Leah Thompson. Dozens of images taken months before she vanished. Leah by her car. Leah hiking. Leah inside the lab, photographed through a window. On Flowers' computer, detectives found forum messages. The login credentials for the Mountain Watcher account were saved in the browser. He was the one who had guided Leah online, offering route advice and quietly earning her trust. Search history filled the screen: home mummification, Preserving Human Remains, Postmortem Body Treatment. The dates stretched from January to July of 2009. But the most chilling discovery waited in the basement freezer. Tucked between frozen food was a sealed plastic container. Inside lay Leah's life, carefully arranged: her backpack, tent, sleeping bag, GPS device, satellite phone, camera. Clean. Ordered. Preserved like artifacts behind glass. Flowers was arrested immediately. At the station, Detective Connor led the interrogation himself. Flowers sat motionless, hands folded, face blank. Evidence was placed before him: the wax, the chemicals, the photographs, Leah's belongings. He listened without reaction. When Connor finally asked if he had killed Leah Thompson, Flowers held his gaze for a long moment. Then, quietly, he asked for a lawyer. The room fell silent. What followed was reconstruction. Investigators pieced together months of quiet surveillance. Flowers had watched Leah, learned her routines, studied her hiking habits. When she posted her August plans for the White Mountains on the forum, he made his decision. On August 15, 2009, he took leave from work and drove north in his dark green pickup. He parked away from the main trailhead. Blended in. Carried his own pack. Looked like every other hiker. He knew where she would camp that first night. After dark, he approached her fire. Introduced himself as another traveler. Spoke calmly. Leah saw no threat. At some point, he offered her a homemade energy drink, claiming it was a special hiking blend. She drank it. Minutes later, her body betrayed her. The drug took hold. Her limbs failed. Her voice disappeared. He restrained her. Gagged her. Waited. Then, methodically, he ended her life. When it was done, he wrapped her body in the tarpaulin he had brought. He extinguished the fire. Erased the campsite. Lifted her onto his shoulders and carried her through the dark, kilometers, to a place he had prepared days earlier. A pit carved into the ravine slope, hidden beneath stones. He returned to his truck for the wax and heating equipment he had cached nearby. All night, he worked. Melting. Pouring. Layer by layer. By morning, the body was sealed. The pit was closed. A boulder set in place. Just another cluster of rocks among hundreds. Then he went home. He stored Leah's belongings in his freezer and resumed his life. Work. Conversations. Hikes. No suspicion followed him. Why? Psychological evaluations revealed the answer. Flowers suffered from a concealed form of necrophilia, not driven by violence, but by preservation. He was obsessed with stillness. With stopping time. With transforming death into what he believed was perfect, lasting beauty. He did not see his actions as destruction, but creation. In his private notes, he wrote of blending life and death into a single, flawless state. He wrote that Leah's natural grace and love of nature made her ideal. That death, in his mind, had freed her from impermanence. It was a sickness, hidden, cultivated, and deadly. The trial began in March 2012. Flowers faced charges of first-degree murder with aggravating circumstances, kidnapping, and desecration of a corpse. The defense argued insanity. The prosecution answered with evidence: months of planning, forged prescriptions, careful preparation, deliberate concealment. Conscious choice. After 3 days of deliberation, the jury returned a unanimous verdict: guilty on all counts. The sentence was life imprisonment without parole. Leah's parents sat through every hearing. When the verdict was read, Martha wept, not in triumph, but in grief. Justice did not return their daughter. Leah was cremated. Her ashes were scattered across the mountains she loved. A small memorial plaque now rests along a Mount Adams trail. It reads, "In memory of Leah Thompson, who loved these mountains. May her spirit always be free." Her story became a warning that danger does not always announce itself, that monsters rarely look like monsters, and that someone who works with the dead can, quietly, choose to create them. Richard Flowers now lives in a maximum security prison. He keeps to himself. He speaks little. Psychologists note one thing above all else. He shows no remorse. Only silence.